Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, today it's a solo episode, and we're talking about one of the most difficult spiritual concepts, which is surrender or letting go. And it is one of the most difficult concepts because it isn't just about attachment to outcomes. It's about our attachment to our feelings. It's about our attachment to it's an ego issue. Now, ego's not evil or bad. But we do have to be able to kind of step outside ourselves to look at ourselves in order to be able to grow and to be able to evolve. And we get lots and lots of advice about releasing attachment to outcomes, particularly as it pertains to things like manifesting or doing magic or relationships or anything within our life. But we don't get a lot of instruction, I kind of want to say, on the process of how to do that. So that's what this episode is kind of. I'm trying to approach a method for people of how to let go, how to release what isn't serving us, and how to move forward even if we've had disappointments, because we will all have disappointments, and that is part of a spiritual journey. It is something that is trying to help us learn, even though it can be a very difficult part of that particular journey. So, housekeeping at the top of this, because I got to do the housekeeping at the top of this. I started a Patreon. It will contain the Spirit Guide Daily, and it will also contain some guided meditation at the lowest levels. And I'm keeping it there for a while, see how well it builds, to see if we want to do things like add some magic lessons and a couple of other things. But that's available now, and there is a link in the episode description. I will eventually be starting a YouTube membership. Like all people who do a lot of magic, I struggle with technology, and I found out that there was a slight upload issue that I had not anticipated prior to beginning the whole process. So the YouTube membership idea is at least 1 month delayed, as I had a month of Spirit Guide Dailies ready to go that I could not use on both platforms. And I chose Patreon because I already had it set up. It was really that complex. You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session to help you look into what's going on in your subconscious, what goes on from unresolved issues from the past. And that's what we often do in life coaching sessions. We set some goals as well as to what you're trying to resolve and what you're trying to go towards. And you can only book me through at therisingmoon.com. I will never, ever, ever, ever approach you in a comment section, in a DM. Like all readers, all spiritual healers, we have problems with scammers trying to impersonate us. They're almost always associated with a WhatsApp message. So by the way, if this is not just particular to me, if anyone on any platform is approaching you, the real people, we don't do that. Like the most we'll do is like send out announcements of sales. So keep that in mind. And then you can find my YouTube channel at Cronecast at the Rising Moon, where I still post picket cards. It'll still be free content. I'm very dedicated to trying to make sure people have access to free healing resources, because health should not be dependent on wealth. And we are all trying to heal from something. So let's get going with this particular concept of how to release, how to let go, and why it's so important. We cannot move into a clear space where more can come to us, where new things can come to us, until we have resolved issues that are no longer serving us. Energies that are kind of clinging to us have to be released in order for us to have a fresh start. It's not that we are there's finite room for energy. It allows for new, when almost like shedding a skin, when we let go of the past. But surrender is the concept that gets talked about most in spiritual healing groups, in spirituality and spiritual enlightenment. And surrendering to the journey, understanding that sometimes difficult things will be brought to us, and trying to not view them with resentment, the why me, but rather the, okay, what's this trying to teach me? And if we lean into the lesson, then the lessons become easier. Things are resolved more easily. We will have fewer challenges once we accept that challenges are simply part of this life. They give contrast to our achievements. They give contrast to our triumphs. In order to have one thing, we have to be willing to experience another. For instance, if you love, then you are going to have to accept that sooner or later you will grieve in some capacity. Because even though fear is the opposite energy of love, with love can come loss, with gain can come loss, and that will engender grief. And because we have trouble separating the idea of living in the moment and the idea of like not everything matters within that moment, Sometimes we can fear our negative emotions when we're on a spiritual journey. It might hurt, it might suck, it might feel bad for a little bit, but let yourself feel something in order to understand it. When I first began a whole healing journey, I had been around very reactionary people who were very punishing if you had emotions or reactions they did not like. So I learned to stuff them down so much that when I first began healing, the only way I could get out my feelings was to write them. I couldn't even talk about them. And that was within the last 5 years. I've really been on a healing journey from a toxic relationship for 5 years at this particular point. And I could not talk about my feelings at first because I was so used to having to hide them from my ex-husband. And so I learned to hide them even from myself. So I went through this process of writing about my feelings in order to be able to kind of almost, get the process started, prime the pump. And I encourage everyone to start doing that, is to start figuring out what you feel about your past. Even if it stirs up negative emotions, that's kind of an almost cleansing and a purging. That's part of letting go. The past is just memory, but it can contain old energies and it contains the lessons that perhaps we didn't entirely learn. And so there is a point in going back and understanding that and by the way, do not do this if you're still in the stage of healing where you're triggered into dissociation. When you continue to work on your energies, when you continue to work on self-understanding, when triggers come up, you learn how to handle them and you learn to take the appropriate steps to keep you in the healthiest energy that you can be in, so that what might have been a massive explosive trigger becomes like a mild, sort of irksome event as you go forward. And sometimes the best you can do with a deep trauma disorder or with deep trauma or with old pain is to work towards resolving it rather than repairing it. Because repairing is not always, it's not always possible, but resolving is, meaning that you can understand what it did to you, you can understand the steps that you need to take in order to best take care of yourself. But the thing that will never ever work is hiding from it. And that's where the letting go and surrender comes in. But it starts with this kind of personal accounting of what you feel your past contained and working through those first primary emotions, those kind of very vividly drawn ones that are very about the core feeling. But as Jacob and I are doing a podcast on dealing with inner dichotomy soon, but I believe this one's going to come out before it. And so one of the things that you have to understand is that within that feeling is the idea that more than one thing can be true at once. So your primary feeling about something contains your personal view, what it did to you. And then the next stage in healing is trying to understand the people around you, what might have forged them, what they might have been thinking, what kind of pain they were in that they might have been damaging towards you. I've shared before that I was very badly bullied as a kid, like really very badly bullied. If I lived in the modern age, the authorities would have intervened in my home situation and in my school situation, but I didn't. It was at a time before those things were really focused on. And as I healed from it, what I began to understand was that there is a stage in development where it is very normal for people to seek acceptance as a form of like self-esteem. And that because I've always been, guess what? I've always been a little bit out there. I've always been a little bit different. I've always stood out a little bit. I became a very natural target because I was not a person who contained malicious energies easily, meaning I wouldn't pick on other people. So I was going to get picked on. But when I looked at the people who had bullied me, I started to understand that they were just kind of all in that same stage, that they were all trying to form self in a world that tells you that like you have to fit within a certain box in order to be considered acceptable. And I was just somebody who was never going to fit inside that box. And it was a problem that, almost everybody who's had a close personal relationship with, I've had a personal relationship with is that I'm really unlikely to do anything other than what I'm guided to do. And I have this very like core moral center. It's part of the reason that I work exclusively with archangels in the magic that I do, is that it's the purest form of energy that I can reach for, whether it is air, water, earth, fire. I go to the guardian angel that is part of that. And the only way for me to do that was I need to be able to listen solely to my own counsel. And people like that are always going to be standing on the outside. And so I looked at the people who bullied me and I understood that they were in a developmental stage as well and not handling it well. And likely many of them have regrets for the way that they acted. Some of them might not. Not everybody learns within this journey, but that's how I resolved that. So that's one that's one instance, one example of how understanding what it did to you, fearing like repercussions for words said or actions taken or outfits worn or whatever it might be, kept me from intermixing with people throughout the course of my life. Because, from my standpoint, I had been rejected. And as an adult, what I saw was I was being rejected for being different. And that being made different means that you're made different for a different purpose. And that's part of surrender. Not the why did that have to happen to me on top of everything else, but it's like, no, it's kind of understandable. And that's the worth of doing the work, is that you start to look at people around you not as your foes or your enemies, but as people on their own journey, having their own difficulties with the lessons that life brings us. And when we start comparing ourselves to other people, it is always very, very easy to see what they have and what we don't, and to think that that means that they have it better. We never understand another person's internal world. Because of a set of strange circumstances that frankly had to do with my father dying, I went from a very economically depressed area to a ridiculously privileged area. I mean, there are I lived in a town where literal kings would send their sons to that university. There was a lot of privilege in that particular town. And so I saw the contrast between people who have a great deal and people who have very, very little indeed. And I found that the people with great deal were not actually happier. They were less trusting of others, less likely to reach out to another person to try and help them. Where I came from originally, if your car broke down on the side of the road, you had about 5 minutes before somebody would stop to help you. Because when you live in an economically depressed area, people have a tendency to pull together instead of push apart. Because in more privileged areas, people have a tendency to be very afraid of what they are going to lose. So I saw that people with more are not necessarily happier. And that is another thing about the idea of surrender, is that if you base how you feel about your life and comparing it to other people, you will always feel kind of crappy, because either somebody's got it so bad that you feel guilty for what you have, or else somebody has it so good that you cannot help but feel like you are a peasant comparatively. And this is in any area, whether it's about economic security, or whether it's about how somebody looks, or whether they have good health, or whether they have a good family structure. And it can be a very deceptive way of looking at the world, and it's best to try and release it. And one of the ways that you can release the need to compare yourself to others is to remind yourself of the good things that happened in your journey. Because like what I'm always saying is, talking about that bum childhood, I could sit here for 5 minutes straight and talk about all the incredible, wonderful, imaginative, dreamlike blessings that came with that, because I always listen to my own counsel. I've never done things to try and be included. So it means that I'm usually the voice standing out and like calling out stuff sometimes. Doesn't make me the arbiter of anything or an authority on anything. It's just that inclusion is not one of the things that guides me. So it has given me a very strong sense of who I am. And that's one of the areas where it's like, well, within the curse is the blessing. And if you've been asked to overcome a lot, that means that you've been given the ability to be resilient and to persevere. And many people, as they stand in their resiliency and their need to keep going as they are challenged with so much, will not feel very resilient. They'll be like, I don't feel good. I'm anxious all the time. I'm unhappy. And like, they think that there isn't like a sub-basement on that feeling of where it could really go and go wrong. And the prisons and the streets of many major cities are filled with people who their resilience gave out on them, that they were not given the ability to keep going. And if you keep going even when you feel horrible, that's still a form of perseverance. But what you're trying to release, what you're trying to surrender, is the feeling of investing in it as being like some form of punishment. Now, that's another instance of surrender and of letting go and of releasing. And when you start to do this as a way of life, when you start to view like the moment as like, well, what is this trying to teach me from the past? It informs the present. And you will still have days where you wake up and you feel kind of afflicted, or you still feel like you're a little bit under the gun. But it gives you that perspective. When you gain it for the past, you can apply it to the present. And then that makes the future immediately easier, because the way you handle and process things becomes fine-tuned to the best of your ability. And like, here's my advice to people: please don't stop working on it, because we keep thinking about healing as a destination. I will get here, I will be healed. And that is not what the human condition really is. It is an ability to work with the parts of ourselves that need to exist so we can have the contrast, but need to be taken care of appropriately so they don't become what I call the everything ruiner, your own little saboteur within you. When you try and neglect your negative feelings, that's what happens to them. They become the things that you're hoping not to step on, your own personal landmines within you. And understanding the world that you are in and your place in it, and being very honest with yourself about the ways in which, even though it came from damage, maybe you didn't make the best choices. And it's always safest for me to use myself as an example, so that's what I'm going to do right now. Long past the point of it being sustainable, I tried to remain within a marriage because since I had this incredibly screwed up childhood where my parents, I don't even really remember my parents being married. I have 4 memories of them being together, and they're hideously violent ones. So I don't remember them as a couple. I'm not one of those kids who wished that my parents would get back together. It made me a very odd kid because it was, I think the whole state breathed a sigh of relief when those people broke up because they were so incredibly violent towards each other. And there was fault on both sides. There was fault on both sides. So I did not view divorce as a bad thing. And it made me a very strange person growing up. And I did not really have a particularly traditional view of marriage. I thought it was something that you kind of, I don't know, did because you were supposed to. And the goal was to stay in it no matter what. And that's where I went really far wrong. And the first time I got married, I was not taking it seriously enough. Again, I thought it was just a stage in life that you achieved. By the time I married my ex-husband that, from the ended 5 years ago relationship, I had changed my mind and was trying to be incredibly, incredibly committed to it and thought if I'm ever going to do this again, I'm going to go in 100%. I'll be dedicated and, his problems will be mine. And, I will never ever cheat or strain or have my eye wander or any of those things that, I was concerned about because I did not take marriage very seriously the first time I got married. And so there was a backhand to that. I was unwilling to release a relationship because I thought having the relationship was the point rather than the quality of the relationship. And this is where we get back to the topic at hand, which is surrender and letting go. You have to take an accounting of what is actually in your life and what it is doing to you or for you or what your place or part in it is. And I do absolutely play a role in how bad things got in that relationship because I would not leave it even after I was pretty freaking sure he was cheating on me. I tried to ignore it. I tried to deny it. I tried to turn away from it. And at one point, the thing that really finally started to make things break was I won't go into too much detail on that, but there was a giant gaslighting episode in which my ex-husband decided, I think he thought he was trying to be kind to me by telling me because I don't even know what was going on in his head. I can't even guess really, but he started to pretend that he had gone to the future and that he had seen things in this incredible detail that I've been psychic my whole life. I know it doesn't work that way, but I thought he was mentally ill versus lying to me. And over the course of time, it would become obvious that he was actually simply lying to me. But at first, I really got caught in that strange little trap of deciding who I would be at one point in my life for the rest of my life, which is where release comes in as well. So when I married him, I'm I'm taking this one to the grave. I'm going to take these vows so seriously. And I thought he was because there are people in his family with delusional mental illness. So there was a reason that I thought it was possible that he was simply unwell. Well, you can't leave a sick man that would be the worst thing that I could possibly do. And that the behavior did not stand alone. There were a bunch of other things in it in which he was treating me everything about me was a terrible burden and he was barely putting up with me pretty much every single day of my life. He would literally get up and walk away from conversations we were having. If I spoke about a feeling at all, he would accuse me of monologuing. He had a lot of controlling mechanisms in making sure that I had to keep my feelings to myself, even about the relationship. And to add on top of that, the thought that I was oh no, he's manifesting this terrible genetic disease. Somehow I need to get him help. And how am I going to do that? And as I said, over the course of time, it became obvious that he was gaslighting me. He was literally making things up and trying to challenge my sanity. He did know enough about PTSD that he knew that confusing me would be very, very triggering. And so he would do that on purpose as well. And so I was in a really pitiful condition by the time that I finally understood I have to end this situation. And I'm a very protected person. I will tell the whole story of the big giant spell that I did that invoked archangels out the wazoo and like protect me. But here's a proviso that goes along with invoking angelic protection. They will do what is best for you. They will protect you, and it may involve nothing that you want. Nothing that you want, because their whole goal, if you ask for divine intervention and you say, protect me from this person at all costs, then some of the costs might be paid by you. And that is what happened to me. But where I stand today, I'm so grateful that I did that work. And I'm so grateful that it worked as well as it did and works to this day. But I have learned to accept in that surrender and release that we are talking about is that sometimes the way things need to work out for the best outcome will suck as it's going on. Because the amount of challenge that was brought to me in the first couple of years after that decision was intense. It was intense and difficult, and I had to really, really fight. And at one point, this is funny enough that I will share, I had a wonderful, wonderful divorce lawyer. What a wonderful human being she was and is. But she's not a vicious person. And my ex-husband had hired like the worst divorce lawyer he could possibly find. In terms of like having, well, I don't know her as a human being, but she certainly seemed very heartless from my perspective, but maybe that's just kind of normal. I had to write the responses to that lawyer because they were so like, make sure that I was impoverished forever type of energy that like I knew how to fight him, because what he did not understand was I had caught on to the fact that he was lying to me. And so I was simply observing him, understanding that like he, the idea that, the whole art of war is like, be unpredictable and make sure that the person that you're considering your foe cannot predict you. And then to study their tactics, because it is the thing that will predict what you need to do and what they are most likely to do. And so that's what I did. And I deployed his own tactics against him. And it worked well enough that here I sit and everything is fine. But that's the type of challenge that I'm talking about. Is my divorce lawyer even said, like, if you want to change lawyers and find somebody who's just outright evil, then you can do that. But I'm not. And like, I don't know how to fight this. And it's like, that's okay. I do. And so she would send me the rough drafts, and I would, because of course I don't really know, I'm not a lawyer. I would write back to her with do this, say this, say that. And like the whole structure of it was something that I did, it was horrible. It was so hard to do. And I thought I was going to die from the stress, but it did actually work. And in the aftermath, it was a skill that I had gained. And that's what we're talking about with surrender and letting go, is understanding that sometimes the way something is brought to you to help you will be so intensely uncomfortable. It's trying to help you expand and grow and to gain confidence. And that sometimes our challenges will be very challenging indeed. But letting that part go instead of the why this, why that, why didn't you protect me more, I invoked protection. And what they did was they set up a situation where I would learn to protect myself and to become very skilled at it, and to learn good boundaries, and to learn to not ignore the signs that somebody might be deceiving me or manipulating me, as a for instance. And so it helped me tremendously. And that's all part and parcel of what goes into the surrender and the release and the letting go process, is to accept your life as it is right now is part of the surrender process. Learning to accept your life as it is right now as not being a punishment, an affliction, like magic you didn't work, but rather what I want from my life is the things that are coming to me are trying to teach me how to go forward, how to persevere, how to not give up, how to keep trying. Everyone is here to have a different experience. And some people will live lives that as I've referenced before, people ending up on the streets. And again, please try not to judge people. You don't know what they've been through. And a lot of those people that might endure the censure of the world around them have had incredibly difficult lives in which they did not have a support system. They did not have a good role model. They've had every unlucky break in the world. And so what is that lifetime trying to teach them about is the value in continuing to go on, that there is value within this world, even when you don't have what you think that you want. But also quite simply that we do live lifetimes in which failure is the thing that we're learning about. And that whether or not we realize it, we will carry those lessons on to our next incarnation or to add to collective knowledge. Kind of think of those people as being researchers in a particular area of life. But the other thing to remember, because people get very challenged around the idea of there being a divine purpose, and when we're talking about surrender and letting go, at the root of it is the understanding that there is meaning in everything. And what I've found in people who do not believe is that they look at the corruption and the hypocrisy of religion, and they think that religion is synonymous with the divine, and it's not. The divine is an energy, the purest form of the best that we can be, that we reach for. And when we invite that into ourselves, we can become the best version of ourselves that we can be. And religion tried to build what is mostly a power structure around that concept. I have to close my door because it's what time? It's beeping on the driveway time. They changed the days on me, guys, so sometimes I have no idea when it's coming. But anyway, the whole idea that if we look at the world around us and there can't be a divine presence because children starve, there are wars. We built this world. This world is our responsibility. The purpose of the divine in our lives is to give us the strength to meet our challenges, to learn our lessons, to become who we wish to be, to overcome what is brought to us, because there is a level of confidence, self-assurance, and the ability to achieve self-love that comes with facing your own challenges that nothing else can imbue in you. You will not know who you are until you are tested. And you may find out that you are somebody that you can truly admire. Or you may find out that you're somebody who needs to do work on things. Because that's what I was finding out during all those challenges is it's like, I clearly still have some grief and some anger to unpack over this situation with everything that happened to me in my childhood. And that's what I started doing with talking about my feelings with myself. Was again, couldn't talk about them at first, so I wrote about them. I actually am a fairly gifted writer. And then I learned how to talk about them, talking into voice memo, and then listening to them back so that I could really hear what was going on with me. And it was a pretty intense process, but it actually did work. And I was guided throughout all of that. I was helped throughout all of that. And what I've learned to do is to view myself as being an incredibly fortunate person, because when I ask for help in overcoming something, when I ask for help in understanding self, when I ask for help in helping others, the circumstances aligned to allow me to do that. But I had to let go of what I wanted that picture to be, which is the art of surrender, which is what we're talking about. The art of surrender, the art of letting go, is to understand that there is a purpose to everything, even if it's difficult. Sometimes it's teaching you how to coexist with a feeling of frustration, or even a feeling of failure, or a feeling of futility, and to continue going, even though you might not get the earthly rewards that you want, but that you know you're doing the right thing. And that's the real thing that people have to face when they are trying to work in a purposeful energy. Now, we are talking about life's purpose, and some people like wanting to manifest a particular life in two separate categories. Not that there's anything wrong with wanting a good life, but if you're like trying to manifest success, and you're trying to manifest a big house, or you're trying to manifest a particular relationship, those are all very like want driven. What you want to have your surroundings be as you take your journey. Nothing wrong with that. People who are on a purposeful journey or on a spiritual enlightenment journey want to be able to feel a connection with the universe and the powers around them. And they want to be able to understand self and others, and to understand what this life truly is meant to bring us, and to find the beauty in a life that may not have everything you want around you, but in which you can find things to celebrate and love. And then when you do that part, this part, the other part they were talking about with the wants, the needs, and everything, that can come in without challenging your spiritual evolution and your spiritual growth. And it is why some people who are spiritual leaders can have incredible amounts of wealth, because they're not defined, their place in this world is not defined by that. And what they're doing is not to try and manifest that, but rather that is something that came to them through their efforts. And if it were all to leave tomorrow, they would still have that same connection with the divine. The first step in trying to learn how to release is understanding things, is understanding yourself and others. And if you struggle with that, please, there are great therapists. And I always encourage people to reach towards trained professionals in understanding their own emotions. If you do not have the money to do that, which is one of the reasons that I do this, that I talk about things that are a little bit like raw and open, is because it's still possible to do it. It's still possible to do it, but you have to be pretty dedicated. You have to be your own kind of, I want to say, boss within the situation, where you strive to understand self and that you don't hide from the parts of yourself that you don't like, which is the thing that we all do. Because every part of you it has a purpose. And as I said, like the abilities to enjoy exist in those contrasts. And in order to really coexist with those things, we do have to release the importance of them. So if you're angry, as a for instance, anger is the everything ruiner. It is the thing that will poison every single well. Anger, frustration, and patience. And things will be held back from you in terms of, like, particularly if you're trying to manifest success, until such time as you lose the where is it, where is it, where is it, where is it? Instead, like if you look around, you're like, it's not here yet. Well, what am I supposed to be doing as I wait and as I continue? Because you can't put your life on pause, on hold, waiting for everything to get here before you are inhabiting your life, because we live in a very uncertain world. And as things will come to you in the time that they are meant to. And that's part of the divine timing concept that I did another podcast on. I think I did that one with Jacob. Divine timing means that everything happens when it's meant to, but that doesn't mean it's at a fixed point. And that's the part with surrender and letting go that you need to understand, is that when you release the need to know when's it happening, then it happens more easily, because you're not trying to arrive at a destination. You're trying to find meaning and purpose in every step of a journey. And that's what we're talking about with release. When you're angry, ask yourself, why am I this angry? Examine whether or not you are angrier than the situation warrants, which happens when you have unresolved issues. And when I was talking earlier about like having to, because like, please trust me, writing those letters and having to engage in a legal battle strategy with a known shark lawyer, who, by the way, I actually did manage to beat. So it was really like, I did very well in it, but it was terrifying. It was terrifying because I did not know if I would be able to. And were there other factors at play behind the scene? I believe so. Yes, actually, from everything that I've understood, that I was like not in that one alone. But it was really frightening and it was very difficult. And all throughout it, I kept being told everything is going to be okay. Like every reading I could do, everything that was trying to interact with me kept trying to reassure me everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be okay. But I didn't feel like it was okay, so things weren't okay. Realistically, everything turned out fine, and everything is turning out fine. If I had been able to release the need for proof that everything was going to be okay before I'd reached the end of that particular journey, I would have felt fine throughout it. And so it taught me a very important lesson about when things are difficult, when you're being asked to persevere, when you're being asked to accept, if you will just lean into the, well, what am I being asked to learn or heal? Those are the two best tools in learning to let go and learning to surrender. What am I being asked to learn? What I need to heal? Those are the two questions. What am I being asked to learn? If it is like, where is everything? You're being asked to learn patience, because patience is necessary in every area of your life. And if you react to it with patience, that means you still need to heal it. Patience is not dull. Patience is not tedious. Patience feels fantastic, because you're in this energy of like, stuff's going to happen when it's supposed to happen. What am I supposed to do to enjoy today? Because if it's not happening today, I still have today to enjoy. And that's what patience is. It also gives you better relationships with people, because you're not like reactionary. You're able to be more accepting. You're able to be a better listener, which is part of having good and strong relationships as well. You're able to pause to consider what you want to say. You're able to approach your life in a way, and your relationships and the things that you are doing in a way that will serve you more. Patience is power. I have said it before. I will say it again. I will get it on a bumper sticker if it's going to help people. Patience is power. Inhabit a patient energy, and you will be as powerful as you will ever need to be to face everything that you're meant to. And then understanding that anything will pass given enough time, whether it is heartbreak, which is horrendous. Like it feels terrible, but it does get better over time. And if you're when you're in deep in the weeds, when you're deep in the poo of something, telling yourself, this won't last forever. It will get better is one of the tools. And that is one of the things that in the, what are you being asked to heal? What are you being asked to learn? That's the thing you're being asked to learn. Is that no matter how pitched a moment is, how frantic it can feel, how painful it is, with the passage of time, that energy will be lessened. And sometimes there's a lot of stress in life. And that's why learning patience is the thing that will have it have the least impact on you. Your stress level will go way, 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 way down when you're in a patient place with the pace of things. So there are a great many benefits to taking the challenge that comes to you, even when it feels awful, and understanding what it's doing and how temporary all of those like very intense feelings really are. Even when you're triggered, understanding that it's like, I'm safe in the here and the now. I need to take very good care of myself. I need to follow my own personal protocol for what do I do to help myself when I'm triggered. And I really, really urge people, particularly trauma survivors, to not look to a partner to help you with that particular process, because it gives them too much control and power over you in the long run, and it can corrupt even really good relationships. Learning to be self-reliant is the most healing thing that you can do. Being self-reliant is nowhere near the same thing as not accepting support or love from people. It means that you know how to support and love yourself so that you're never high and dry without another person. When we're always talking about codependency, is one of the things that results from early childhood trauma, because it removes an essential building block. Trauma does. It removes an essential building block in our ability to feel secure. And so codependency has to do with an insecurity around self, around belief in self, the ability to take care of self. And it's not about weakness. Some of the like strongest people I've ever met in my life, they've endured so much, they will go through so much for people that they love, are codependent. And it is a form of addiction only in that it becomes, when it's filling a need that was not met when you were younger, it becomes very difficult to release it because you're convinced that you need it. And at the base of every addiction is a very need energy. Need, must have, need, must have. Once you are living in a self-reliant and a self-independent energy, when you are able to stand in your own power, which is what independence really is, you're not at the whim of anybody else who might be yanking you around. I'll refer to that divorce battle again. Like they tried to scare the living crap out of me at first, and like I could spot it a mile away. But it still was hard. It was still hard. And I just had to keep telling myself, just be brave and you will win this. Just be brave and you will do this. And it did work out well. It worked out just fine for me. There were still challenges to come after that particular point to teach me other lessons. But that is part of the letting go, the surrender, is from this point in time. If you want to start this process right now, just sit up straight, breathe in, let it go, and tell yourself, whatever is in my life right now is trying to help me, not hinder me. So what's it trying to teach me, and what do I need to heal? And that gives you the key to a door that if you open it and walk through it, you will go on this path, this winding and sometimes hilled path of things getting better. But it does accepting that you might not get everything you want, that frequently when you're not healed, you want people who aren't good for you, or situations that are about a panacea, something that will supposedly make everything better, like wealth or status, or having other people think you're important. That those are the things that will fill in for a lack of confidence, is a lack of self-love, a lack of self-esteem. Is understanding that when you're on this journey, every fear that you have might be brought to you in some form to help you overcome it. It's not to torture you. And while it's going on, understand it's a really normal part of the journey to experience momentary setbacks, where you can be like going along, this is fine, I'm sure I'm learning things, everything's going to get better, this is all for my aid and my help, and then to freak out and be like, why don't you love me enough to help me? It's so normal. It is part of building that ability to endure and to keep going. And why is that such an important part of a spiritual journey? Because it connects you with your divine self. The part of you that is not invested in the moment, the part of you that exists before you are born and after you are gone, is part of what your divine, or your earthly self, part of what your divine self is. It doesn't invest in your happiness or your unhappiness from moment to moment, but understands that if you will lean into the moment of what is this particular thing trying to teach me, that you will become happier in your moment to moment because you're not attached. That's releasing attachments to outcomes as well. You're not attached to every moment as being definitive of your life experience for any period of time, even that one. Even in the moment that you realize, I'm really angry, I am really frightened, I am really anxious, I am really, instead, you look at the emotion that you're having and you understand it's like, well, it will pass. It will pass more swiftly if I take care of it appropriately. And I'll give you, and I always have to use myself as an example because it's the easiest way for people to understand. Today is a Monday. Mondays are one of the days that is correlated with the moon, and like it can actually have some weird ups and downs, and is the day I am most likely to experience anxiety. Now, it could be the start of a new week anxiety, who knows? But when I woke up this morning, even though it exists at a much, much lower level than it used to, I was anxious about my task list. And so I've learned what I need to do is I need to take care of myself in the morning by like walking my dog, eating something. And then I need to go and do something that is physically challenging. And today I was courting death, quite frankly, by hiking up and down these actually mountain bike trails. And the reason I said I was courting death was I took a turn and I started climbing a very, very, very steep incline with rocks and things for handholds. And at the very top, I can see where I'm going to get up there. I'm going to be able to align. The sun's going to hit me. It's going to be perfect for the grounding ritual that I like to do. And at that moment, when I'm halfway up, it occurs to me, it's like, wow, if somebody comes sailing over that ridge on a bike, I am so toast. So I kind of scooted over to one side to make sure that it's like, well, I'll have a chance of like diving into the cacti at least. But that was what I needed to do, was to burn off adrenaline. That's what I learned about my anxiety, is that I'm actually in really good shape because it's an important part of my life, exercise, because it helps me manage an anxiety disorder. But that's what I learned about anxiety. If I wake up in an anxious state, the best thing I can do is something that will healthfully burn off that adrenaline. So I was purposely like climbing essentially a small mountain to make sure that I was huffing and puffing and breaking a sweat. And apparently, like part of me was like, and you should also be really afraid of a BMX bike planting itself in the middle of your forehead in order to really burn this adrenaline off. But that's what I had learned about anxiety, is that the thing that I really need to do seems counterintuitive because my heart's in great shape. And by the way, whenever I give advice like this, please remember, it is very important to find out if you're healthy enough to do some of the things that I say, because this is not meant to take the place of medical advice nor therapeutic advice. It is just an example I'm using that you may be able to glean some information from in order to help yourself with this process. And you kind of self-style it. But for me, anxiety responds to the release of adrenaline that I seek in a healthy fashion, which for me is exercise. Sometimes it really is like doing something that will vaguely frighten me in order to burn that off. Because like, I'll tell you what, there's nothing that puts the perspective of like, what if I don't get my task list done today, into a healthy perspective with realizing, oh yeah, wow, like that thing's about 12 feet above me and like, I'll hear them coming. So I'll have time to like dive into the cactuses. But like I should really get over to the side, because if anybody is just winging it and going over that ridge, they are likely to be catching air and touching down right where I am clinging to a rock. And that it was a little bit scary, but it was a good kind of fear of understanding that like I had this ability to foresee what might go wrong, to react to it appropriately. And also I was burning off that anxiety. And that is just one of the things that happens when you surrender not to the vagaries of fate, but rather to the understanding that every single moment, if you understand yourself, you are armed to have the best outcomes. And that is the point of letting go. Because we cling to the moments of, why is this happening? Why won't this happen? Why can't I have the person I want? Why don't I have the relationship I want? Why don't I have the job I want? It is to teach you, first of all, to make sure the things you're trying to bring you are actually meant for you, but it is also self-understanding, which gives you access to every single part of your personal power. And within it is the idea that karma is real in a sense that it's like the energy that you create. And the energy that you create is what will return to you at an intensified signature, which is where, like, be sure to try and treat other people with kindness and deference and respect, because that is what will return to you. If you treat others with contempt or as if they are a burden to you, then don't be surprised if you're left a little high and dry in this world because you didn't value the people that were brought to you. And that is not to call anybody out on anything. It's mostly telling people who've been with abusers that it's like, I hear a lot, and I have this really popular readings, there's two of them, about what will happen to them for hurting me. And I had done it at a request. Someone had asked me, they saw another reader do a form of that, and they're like, hey, would you do one? Because you always have the right information for me. I did it. It was so popular, I did another one. And the thing that I always need people to understand is that they will have the emotional quality that they court. Meaning you don't have to worry about these people who treated you as if you were worthless going on to have this great, wonderful life, because they treat the people who love them as being worthless. They will invariably not experience love because they simply, it's not the energy that they're trying to inhabit. And that is, no matter how much stuff somebody has, if they wake up in this emotionally empty void that is filled with fear and anger and frustration and a grasping quality, it feels awful. It feels awful. And that's what results from treating those around us with disdain for their humanity. And I always just say that not because anybody deserves punishment. It's simply that, some people, their lessons, they make them worse. We make our lessons worse if we won't lean into learning them. And one of the things that I did not that long ago was I had placed a karmic curse on actually two people who had done something that I was so concerned that they might do it to somebody else because they had at-risk people in their family, that like I was like, okay, I have to do this God's justice curse in order to make sure that people are safe. And I released the curse entirely because I kept being asked to through a series of things that I won't go into too far. And at first I couldn't because I'm like, no, like, what if they hurt somebody else? What if this person in particular hurts somebody else? And I would feel guilty for the rest of time. And I just kept being asked to ask, to release, to release, to release. And then I finally understood. It's like, well, first of all, I don't need to do that. They've created that energy, they'll have to deal with it. And I asked for it to be intensified so that they would learn their lessons. So I don't know what happened, but like I kept being asked to release, to release, to release. And I finally just did. I broke all of that, all magics against anyone. And it's a God's justice curse, which means it will only work if the person really deserves a karmic butt kicking. And I've said before that karma is not about punishments nor rewards, but it's about lessons. So like a difficult lesson is what a karmic butt kicking would be. When difficult lessons come to us, lean in on studying. That's part of surrendering and letting go. But here's the big key to the idea of surrender, is to understand that no matter what is going on in your life, whether you are heartbroken, whether you are unemployed, whether you live in desperate situations right this very moment, your life is as it is meant to be, to bring you the lessons that you need to learn about yourself and others, to truly integrate and align and be part of, to be one with your divine self. And it doesn't matter what is in your life. Somebody, for instance, is like, well, why are some people rich as can be and never have to worry about going to a doctor or anything? Because they're actually being asked to give more to other people, and very few people do. And so the emotional quality of their life will get worse and worse, is what usually happens, Or their ability to be grounded in reality, as we see with people like Jeff Bezos or Bezos, however you might pronounce it. They used to be Bezos. I don't know what he pronounces it as any longer. Or Elon Musk, where they have become so like invested in self that as people starve, like they're sending themselves to the moon and that kind of thing. And what price will they pay for that? Don't think price in terms of dollars. It is simply a lesson. The lessons that will come to them at different points of their lives will be, if you only have people around for your personal gain, don't be surprised if you're surrounded by people who are trying to use you. As a for instance, that's the lesson that's in there. Or if you have somebody who's loving and devoted to you and you treat them like something off the bottom of your shoe, don't be surprised if the quality of people that come into your life then reflect that energy, because you rejected something that was more about trying to give you love, trying to connect you with the idea that love is to be honored and to be treated with compassion and almost, I don't want to say reverence exactly, but gratitude that what our lives are really trying to teach us. And the thing about letting go and surrender is that no matter what is in your life right now, the divine asks you to try and find gratitude for your existence within that moment. And there will be people who are suffering from terrible diseases, who are suffering from horrible abuse. And it's, what in the world could I be grateful for in this particular moment? First of all, for receiving that piece of information about trying to learn how to be resilient, trying to learn about yourself while you make the choices that you make, because that is the most empowering thing as well. When you understand why you do the things that you do, you can then purposely choose to do the things that will bring you better results. As a for instance, everything in your life at this particular moment, let go of the idea that life is happening to you and understand and embrace the idea that life is trying to teach you something. And if you've had a life with a lot of loss, it is about learning to value what is there while it is there and not placing your ability to value it in the idea that it is permanent. And circling all the way back to the why I remained in a relationship, I got it in my head that one of the marks of success of being a healed and a healthy person being is to have long and enduring relationships. And even though the quality of the relationship for me got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, I could not accept that it was not that I needed to let go of it in order to, it was not going to get better. Like the person on the other side of it was declining to get better in terms of treating me properly. And I had to let go of it, that I had gotten my self-worth wrapped up in an exterior set of circumstances, a marriage. Some people do it with jobs, some people do it with stuff, rather than who am I in every moment. Everything around you is trying to help you find the best version of yourself that you can be, so that you are connected to that part of yourself and you are resilient and you are compassionate and you are loving and you are connected and you are therefore successful within every moment, no matter what your exterior circumstances might hold. The point of surrender is to invite the lessons into your life rather than to try and hold them at bay with a shield, or to think that the point of a healing journey is that to arrive at a destination where then it's smooth sailing. The point of a healing journey is to arrive at a point within yourself that no matter what the seas around you are doing, it is smooth sailing within, for you believe in your ability to cope and to persevere and to overcome and to learn. And one of the things about aging, because our society is incredibly ageist, is that you will actually age much better if you go towards your personal changes rather than trying to get back to a different point in time or trying to cling to a part of your life that is faded into memory. Always go towards the next stage of your life with exuberance and interest, and knowing that change is the things that can bring joy and delight and surprise, and that it has a lot of value to be flexible with when things need to change, they will change. Sometimes relationships will end. Sometimes careers will end. Sometimes circumstances will end. Sometimes once loving relationships will turn toxic because we try and linger in them because we're too attached to the idea of permanence as a culture. That's not our fault, by the way. Please remember, a lot of what you value, a lot of what you prize, a lot of what you think you're supposed to be doing was programmed into you as an idea by a society that mostly wants to make money. And so if some of the things that are programmed into us about what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to achieve and what we're supposed to remain in don't bring you personal happiness, understand that there's a reason that was never why it was programmed into you. It was not about making you personally happy. It was about making a machine function, usually to benefit others, people in power. So that's another thing about surrender and letting go, is from where you are in your life, quit trying to hit these benchmarks, quit trying to achieve these things that you were told you were supposed to have in order to be happy. The easiest one to point at is always going to be marriage. Like particularly women, are kind of schooled to believe that your wedding day, it's a big deal and everybody pays attention to you and you're beautiful and they take all these videos and like we really like we prize that idea as an achievement when it in fact is like it's something that like half of marriages fail. Most relationships are not meant to be lifelong. They're meant to be, we are with a partner for a stage of our journey. Every now and then you will have a lifelong relationship, but it is more of a rarity than people like to believe it is. And that it does have to do with a functioning of society that, you know, they want you married up and like, you know, put into your slot and into your compartment. But that men and women are taught different things in gendered societies about what marriage means and how they're meant to treat it, and that it is very disparate, and that women put their whole heart and soul into being married, whereas men view it as a stage of life that they occupy when they're trying to be responsible. And that those two things don't marry well together. Those two things do not marry well together. And that maybe marriage ought to be more of a rarity than something that everybody thinks that they need to do. That you only marry somebody that you're really sure is like a good long-term partner, rather than it being like, well, now I've graduated from high school, I've graduated from college, I've done this, I have this career, and now I must marry, to check off these boxes on that programmed list. And that's another part of letting go. If you are not happy right now, if you are frustrated, if you are trying to heal, examine what it is you are trying to achieve and why you are trying to achieve it. Ask the questions again, what am I trying to learn and what am I trying to heal? And that will help you also let go. But when you're stuck in an emotion, when you're feeling out of sorts, when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling sad, telling yourself, I need to address this with the appropriate self-care as soon as I can, and that it's not permanent. Now, there is a proviso with this. Chemical imbalances exist. If you have been in a depressive state that will not respond to self-care, to self-management, to like robust care, then understand that then that is where the role of medicine comes in. That we are gifted with actual understanding of neuroscience and that there are medications that can help you. By and large, things will respond to the appropriate care from a mood management standpoint and taking good care of yourself. So if you're stuck in a moment, then you have to tell yourself, this won't last forever. That is the biggest tool that you can give yourself in the ability to surrender, is understanding the impermanence of absolutely everything that comes to you. Your joy might be fleeting, but so will rage if you allow yourself. And by the way, you will rarely become really enraged, angry when you understand what makes you angry, because at the core of it is almost always a feeling of not being particularly safe. At the core of most terrible anger is fear. And understanding that we are driven by a lot of fears in societies that like are not very secure. And so that we all live cheek by jowl with it, and that learning how to take care of it is the thing that will help you the most. And that this is the hard part. Sometimes you will have to push through discomfort in order to achieve the lesson that you are trying to learn, as in the case of what I was talking about with, was that part fun, where like somebody with literally no legal training had to be like figuring out, well, how am I going up against this lawyer? No, it was not fun, but it was also something that I found the ability to figure out what to do when I really needed to. It felt flippin' awful, but if I had already achieved that level of confidence, it would have been something that I would have done in a very clear-eyed space. That there is worth to riding through discomfort, because you become, I'm not going to say immune, but you start treating your negative emotions like temporary companions that will leave your journey as soon as you are able to resolve their energy. And sometimes resolving and repairing cannot be the same thing, but that resolving gives you the tool to address something as it comes up. Permanent repair is not always possible in our emotional world, but being able to understand self and understand the methods and the means that you need to take care of yourself is. Once you learn something, it is a tool that you can wield against everything that comes towards you. So what do I need to learn and what do I need to heal? And those are the two biggest tools in surrender. But also learning how to talk to yourself in a way about, I'm just going to let this go. It might not pass today, it might not pass tomorrow, but nothing in this life is permanent. Everything will change if I allow it to change. that everything will cling to me when I get stuck in the feeling. The why of this, why is this happening to me? And instead, ask yourself, what am I supposed to be doing with this? And that's another tool for surrender. And why is it such like a linchpin within the idea of spiritual enlightenment? Because it is the thing that separates us from our divine self, the part of ourself that is here to have a journey, that is here to have an experience, that is here to learn things. Whereas the part of ourselves we get caught in, like I said, ego can be such a loaded term because it sounds like it's about vanity. It's not. It's how we first learn to approach self. But when we learn to approach self with the integration of the higher self, the understanding that this too shall pass, this is just part of a journey, then we live in this very balanced and informed state that can bring us the results that we are so hoping for. Surrender, letting go, and leaning in are the things that you need to be able to do on a spiritual journey. And sometimes it will be about enduring things so that you become more immune to them, so that you become used to them, so that like stress and anxiety won't derail you, but rather it's something that you know to maybe go and climb a mountain trail and invite a mountain bike planting itself in the middle of your forehead as a remedy. And of course, I'm almost always out there by myself. So it was just this very, very vague niggling in the back of my mind, kind of like, that could happen. I'd hear them. I'd hear them. In fact, I only ever saw two people out there the entire time I was out there. But I learned how to deal with how to burn off my anxiety in a healthful way. And that came to me because I was left with a lot of things to be anxious with until I learned how to cope with them. And understand that as soon as you go towards the learning of it, that the severity of it lessens just because you are learning how to care for it rather than fight against it. And that is another part of surrender. Surrender is never about giving up. Surrender is about understanding that I can work with everything if I stop fighting against it. So this has been the idea around surrendering and letting go. This is Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. I'm Alane. If you want to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session, you can do so exclusively at therisingmoon.com. There's a link to my Patreon where you can get daily guidance from me Monday through Friday about your own healing journey. It's currently at a very low level, and it's the easiest way to help support the work that I do here. So please consider it, although there's never any pressure. And if you want to find some of the pick cards that I do and some of the other things that I do on YouTube, that is cronecast at the Rising Moon. I always look forward to talking to you. Jacob will be back talking about some other things soon as well. Wherever you are, please hear this. The idea of surrender is sometimes about embracing that sometimes you will be disappointed, but that it still teaches you something. Disappointment is hard. It's the thing that erodes hope so much, because once you've been disappointed, it's hard to be super hopeful. Once you lean in on accepting that everything that is brought to you is trying to help you expand something, the idea of disappointment is itself eroded. It starts to be a smaller and a smaller and a smaller thing. So that you look at a disappointment, you let yourself feel that way, and then you ask yourself what you learned from it and how you can do something better the next time going forward. And hope becomes much easier as well. It is a weird and a counterintuitive thing that once you let go of your expectations around things, you will simply be happier because you're not pinning your happiness, your wellness, or anything about you to a point in time that is yet to arrive. You are looking for it within the moment. And sometimes you'll have to go through moments of anger, of frustration, of fear, of ill health, of harsh circumstances. And that once you learn how to flow with those, you find that happiness and that peace within, and it becomes available to you in every moment of your life. And then you are more connected to the idea of a magical and divine force flowing through this world and helping you and guiding you and making you feel more comfortable within your own skin at all times, which improves your life at a level that is almost impossible to adequately describe. This has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica. Let go and all will come to you.